The Galactic Council chambers hummed with the low vibration of 1,000 different species breathing, chittering, and communicating in ways that would have seemed impossible to most civilizations. At the center of the vast circular amphitheater, High Chancellor Vexthara of the Kethmoran Empire stood with all four of his arms spread wide, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial starlight that bathed the assembly. Fellow beings of the galaxy, his voice carried across the chamber through universal translators. We have gathered here today to discuss the final solution to what we have come to know as the human problem. A ripple of agreement swept through the assembled delegates. The Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in approval, while the crystalline Chardonneth chimed in harmonic resonance. Even the usually peaceful Veltari delegates nodded their elongated heads, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with somber blue light. Vexthara continued, his voice gaining strength. For 300 standard cycles, we have watched this species spread like a plague across the outer rim. They terraform worlds that should be uninhabitable. They adapt to environments that kill other species within hours. They reproduce at rates that defy biological logic. And, worst of all, he paused for dramatic effect. They refuse to acknowledge their place in the natural order. The chamber erupted in murmurs and various forms of alien agreement. Ambassador Thylane of the ethereal collective floated forward, her translucent form shimmering as she spoke. The humans have now established colonies in 47 star systems. Our projections show that if left unchecked, they will outnumber all our combined populations within 5,000 cycles. Unacceptable, growled General Karthok of the Brutal clans, his massive frame making the speaking platform creak under his weight. My warriors report that human soldiers fight with an irrationality that borders on madness. They charge into battles they cannot win. They refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. This stubbornness makes them dangerous opponents. The discussion that followed lasted for hours. Species after species shared their encounters with humanity. The trade disputes, the territorial conflicts, the cultural misunderstandings that always seemed to escalate beyond reason. But underneath all the political rhetoric, there was something else: fear. The humans were different in ways that made the galaxy's established powers deeply uncomfortable. They didn't follow the patterns that every other species had followed. They didn't respect the careful balance of power that had kept the galaxy stable for millennia. They were unpredictable, creative, and, worst of all, they seemed to thrive in chaos. Dr. Althara of the Academic Consortium stepped forward, her data pad glowing with compiled research. My studies show that humans possess something we've never encountered before. They call it imagination. It allows them to conceive of possibilities that don't currently exist, and then work to make them reality. This trait, combined with their pack-bonding instincts and their refusal to accept limitations, makes them a potential threat to everything we've built. Then, we are agreed, Vexthara announced. The humans must be eliminated before they can spread further. But we must be careful. Direct confrontation has proven costly. We need a strategy that will ensure complete success with minimal losses to our own forces. The war planning that followed was meticulous. The galaxy's greatest military minds worked together to design what they believed would be the perfect trap. They would lure the human fleets to Earth's solar system under the pretense of peace negotiations, then deploy a massive combined fleet that would overwhelm any defense the humans could mount. Intelligence reports suggested that humanity's total military force consisted of perhaps 1,000 ships scattered across their colonies. The Galactic Alliance would bring 10,000 vessels from across dozens of species. It would be a show of force so overwhelming that even the stubborn humans would have to see the futility of resistance. What the alien strategists didn't understand was that they were thinking like aliens. They assumed that humans, when faced with impossible odds, would do what any rational species would do: surrender, negotiate, find a way to survive with dignity intact. They couldn't conceive of a species that would look at certain death and charge forward anyway. The first part of their plan worked perfectly. Human diplomats agreed to the peace conference, apparently eager to resolve the growing tensions between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The location was set: Earth's solar system, specifically the space around Jupiter where the gas giant's massive gravitational field would prevent any ships from simply jumping to faster-than-light travel to escape. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display as alien ships began dropping out of hyperspace around Jupiter. The numbers were staggering. Her fleet of 200 ships, the entirety of humanity's home defense force, was outnumbered 50-1. "Admiral," reported Commander Rodriguez from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead Keth-Moran vessel." "Put it through." Vexthara's image appeared on the main screen, his four arms spread in what his species considered a gesture of superiority. "Admiral Chun, I trust you can see the futility of resistance. We offer you terms, surrender now, and your species will be relocated to a single world where you can live out your existence in peace. Refuse, and we will take Earth by force." Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew, young men and women who had volunteered to stand between Earth and annihilation. She saw determination in their eyes, not fear. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, probably sitting in a university classroom, studying to become a doctor. She thought about all the children playing in parks, all the families sitting down to dinner, all the people who trusted her to protect them. "Chancellor Vexthara," she replied, her voice steady and clear, "I have a counter-proposal. You have exactly 30 minutes to withdraw from our solar system. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war." The alien leader's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Admiral, you command 200 ships against our 10,000. Even human irrationality has its limits." Sarah smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several alien commanders shift uncomfortably. "Chancellor, you've made one critical error in your planning." "And what is that?" "You brought your fleet to our house." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her crew. "All stations, prepare for combat operations. Tactical, begin deployment of the maze." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. As soon as Admiral Chun gave the word, space around Jupiter began to change. Massive structures that had been hidden behind the gas giant's moons suddenly powered up. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as mining stations revealed themselves as heavily armed fortresses. The asteroid belt began to move in ways that defied physics until it became clear that many of the asteroids were actually camouflaged ships. But the real surprise was the minefield. Humanity had spent 50 years turning the Jupiter system into a three-dimensional maze of invisible death. Gravitational mines that created crushing fields, antimatter warheads that could vaporize a cruiser, and, most insidiously, hunter-killers, small automated ships that could hide in the electromagnetic chaos around Jupiter until they locked onto a target. The alien fleet suddenly found itself not in empty space where they could use their superior numbers, but in a carefully prepared killing field where their advantages were meaningless. The first wave of ships that tried to advance toward Earth's inner system were destroyed so quickly that the rest of the fleet didn't even understand what had happened. "How is this possible?" demanded General Karthok as he watched his finest warriors die in explosions that seemed to come from empty space. "The humans have turned their entire star system into a weapon," reported his sensor officer, her voice shaking. "Our ships can't maneuver effectively. The gravitational fields are interfering with our navigation systems. And they know exactly where we are while we can't see them coming." On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Chin watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The alien fleet was trapped in the outer system, taking massive casualties from automated defenses while her ships picked off stragglers. But this was just the beginning. "Admiral," reported her intelligence officer, "long-range sensors are detecting additional human fleets approaching from multiple vectors." Sarah nodded. The aliens had been so focused on their intelligence reports about humanity's 1,000 ships that they had missed something crucial. Those reports were 50 years old. Humanity had been preparing for this day since first contact. Every colony, every outpost, every human settlement had been building ships and training crews. The trap wasn't just the Jupiter system. The trap was making the aliens think they were fighting all of humanity when they were actually fighting just the home guard. The real human fleet, 3,000 ships strong and equipped with weapons the aliens had never seen, was about to arrive. As the first human reinforcements began dropping out of hyperspace, Admiral Chin opened a channel to the alien fleet. Chancellor Vexthera, you wanted to see human stubbornness? You wanted to test our refusal to surrender? Well, congratulations. You're about to get a demonstration. The battle for Earth's solar system was about to begin in earnest, and the galaxy was about to learn why humanity had survived every extinction event their world had thrown at them. They were about to discover that when humans said they would defend their home, they meant it in ways that other species couldn't even comprehend. The war that the Galactic Council thought would end in a day was going to last 5 years, and when it was over, the galaxy would never be the same. But that story was just beginning, and the first lesson the aliens were about to learn was that humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to make sure that anyone who threatened their families would regret it for generations to come. The Jupiter system blazed with the light of dying ships as Admiral Chen's trap began to close. The Galactic Alliance had come to Earth expecting to find a cornered animal. Instead, they had walked into the lair of apex predators who had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. The hunt was about to begin, and humanity was done being the prey. The first human reinforcement fleet emerged from hyperspace like ghosts materializing from a nightmare. Captain Marcus Webb watched from the bridge of the UES Retribution as 300 ships dropped their stealth fields simultaneously, appearing within weapons range of the alien rearguard. The Galactic Alliance commanders had been so focused on the trap closing around them in the Jupiter system that they never noticed the predators stalking them from behind. All ships, execute Protocol 7. Admiral Chen's voice crackled across the fleet communications. Protocol 7 was something humanity had developed during their expansion years, when pirates and raiders had learned that humans could be ruthless when protecting their own. It meant no quarter, no prisoners, and no mercy for anyone who threatened human civilians. The Zephyrian destroyer Shard cutter exploded in a brilliant flash as concentrated particle beams from 6 human ships converged on its command section. The alien crew never had time to send a distress signal. Around the Jupiter system, similar scenes played out as human ships emerged from hiding spots that should have been impossible to conceal vessels. Commander Telvas of the Ethereal Collective felt something he had never experienced before: terror. His ship, the Whisper of Stars, had been considered untouchable due to its advanced shielding technology. But the humans were using weapons that bypassed shields entirely, creating localized spatial tears that ripped hulls apart from the inside out. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his science officer. "Unknown, Commander. Their weapon signatures don't match anything in our databases. It's as if they're using principles of physics we haven't discovered yet." What the aliens didn't know was that humanity's greatest advantage wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their perspective. While other species had spent millennia refining existing technologies, humans had approached every problem with the question, what if we're thinking about this completely wrong? The result was weapons that worked on principles other species had dismissed as impossible or impractical. Gravity wells that could crush a ship from within. Quantum entanglement bombs that could detonate simultaneously across multiple dimensions. Temporal displacement fields that aged enemy hulls by centuries and seconds. But perhaps most terrifying of all was humanity's use of something they called chaos mathematics. While alien military doctrine relied on predictable formations and logical tactical progression, human ships moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually based on complex mathematical models that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. Admiral Vexthera watched in growing horror as his carefully planned ambush turned into a massacre. His 10,000 ships were being torn apart by an enemy that fought like no species he had ever encountered. They didn't just engage his forces, they seemed to anticipate his every move, countering strategies before he could fully implement them. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we're receiving surrender offers from the human fleet." For a moment, hope flickered in Vexthera's compound eyes. "Excellent. Put me through to their commander." But when Admiral Chen's face appeared on his screen, there was nothing of defeat in her expression. "Chancellor Vexthera, I'm offering you and your forces one chance to surrender. Withdraw immediately, and we'll allow your ships safe passage to the edge of our system." "You're offering me terms?" Vexthera's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Your forces are still outnumbered 3-1. Sarah's smile was colder than the vacuum of space. "Chancellor, take a closer look at your tactical display. What do you see?" Vexthara gestured to his sensor officer, who brought up the current battle assessment. The numbers made his ichor run cold. In less than 2 hours of fighting, he had lost over 4,000 ships. Not damaged, not disabled, completely destroyed. His remaining forces were scattered across the system, unable to coordinate effectively due to the gravitational interference and the constant hit-and-run attacks from human squadrons. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No," Sarah replied. "This is what happens when you bring a knife to a gunfight. You have 10 minutes to begin your withdrawal. After that, we stop being polite." The transmission ended, and Vexthara stood in stunned silence. Around him, his command staff worked frantically to reorganize their forces, but the damage was already too severe. The humans hadn't just outfought them, they had outthought them at every level. What the Galactic Council had failed to understand was that humanity's expansion across the galaxy hadn't been driven by conquest or resource acquisition. It had been driven by something much more fundamental: the need to survive. Every colony established, every ship built, every technological advancement had been part of a grand strategy to ensure that nothing could ever threaten the existence of the human species. The Jupiter system had been turned into a fortress not just to protect Earth, but to serve as a demonstration. Any species that came to humanity's home system with hostile intent would face such overwhelming retaliation that others would think twice before attempting something similar. Captain Elena Vasquez brought the UES Vengeance alongside a crippled Kethmoran battleship, her Marines preparing to board. The Kethmoran vessel had been trying to reach one of the inner planets to threaten human civilians, a tactical decision that had marked it for special attention. "This is Captain Vasquez of the United Earth Space Force," she broadcast to the alien ship. "Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with lethal force." The Kethmoran commander, General Vikesh, tried to rally his remaining crew for a final stand. But when the human Marines breached his hull, what followed wasn't a battle. It was a lesson in why human soldiers were considered among the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The Marines moved with a precision that seemed almost supernatural, their power armor allowing them to shrug off weapons that would have killed most organic beings. They used the ship's own corridors against the defenders, employing tactics that turned every corner into a potential kill zone. But what truly unnerved the alien defenders was the humans' complete lack of fear. They advanced into heavy fire without hesitation, protected fallen comrades with their own bodies, and fought with an intensity that suggested they took the attack on their homeworld personally. When General Vikesh was finally cornered in his command center, he found himself facing a human Marine who couldn't have been more than 20 years old. The young woman's face was visible through her helmet's visor, and what he saw there made him understand why the galactic community feared humanity. There was no hatred in her eyes, no anger or bloodlust. There was something much worse: determination. This human would kill him not because she wanted to, but because he had threatened her people, and that made his death a necessity rather than a choice. "Surrender now, and you'll be treated according to the Articles of War," she said, her voice perfectly calm despite the chaos of battle around them. Vikesh threw down his weapon. He had fought in hundreds of battles across dozens of worlds, but he had never encountered anything like human resolve. They fought as if the fate of the universe depended on their victory, and perhaps, he realized, it did. Meanwhile, in the outer system, Admiral Chun was receiving reports from her scattered battle groups. The alien fleet was beginning to break apart as individual ships and squadrons attempted to flee the trap. Some were making it to the edge of the system, but many more were being hunted down by human pursuit squadrons that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Admiral," reported Commander Jackson from the Intelligence Division, "we're intercepting alien communications. They're calling for reinforcements from their home fleets." Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected this. The battle for the Jupiter system was just the opening move in what would become a larger conflict. The Galactic Alliance would not accept defeat easily, and when word of their losses reached their homeworlds, they would likely escalate the conflict. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. "Signal all colonial fleets to commence Operation Exodus." What Admiral Chun was about to unleash was humanity's ultimate strategic weapon, their willingness to take risks that other species would consider insane. While the aliens regrouped and planned their next assault on Earth, human fleets would be striking at targets across the galaxy. Not military bases or strategic installations, but the alien homeworlds themselves. The message was simple. If you want to threaten our families, we'll threaten yours. Across the galaxy, human sleeper cells that had been in place for decades suddenly activated. Ships that had been disguised as cargo vessels revealed their true nature as assault carriers. Colonies that had seemed peaceful and isolated suddenly became launch points for strike forces that could reach any system in known space. The Galactic Council had spent months planning their assault on humanity. They had assumed that humans would react like any other species, defensively, predictably, rationally. Instead, they were about to learn that humans didn't just fight back. They fought forward, carrying the war to their enemies' doorsteps with a speed and ferocity that would leave the galaxy reeling. As the surviving alien ships limped toward the edge of the solar system, they carried with them news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The humans weren't just dangerous because they were unpredictable. They were dangerous because they were unbreakable, and they had just demonstrated that any species foolish enough to threaten Earth would face consequences beyond their worst nightmares. The war that was supposed to end human expansion across the galaxy had instead announced to the universe that humanity would no longer be content to simply survive. They had been pushed too far, and now they were pushing back with everything they had. The Battle of Jupiter was over, but the real war was just beginning. And the galaxy was about to discover that when humans said, "never again," they meant it with a conviction that would reshape the stars themselves. The Kethmoran homeworld of Vexthoris had never known war on its surface. For over 2,000 years, the planet had been the beating heart of one of the galaxy's most powerful empires, protected by layer upon layer of defensive systems that made it virtually impregnable. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons capable of reducing entire fleets to cosmic dust. The planet's 3 moons had been converted into massive fortresses, their surfaces covered with shield generators and particle beam arrays. High Command Marshal Zekthara stood in the central command bunker, deep beneath the planet's capital city, watching status reports flow across holographic displays. The news from Earth's solar system had reached them 6 hours ago, and the scale of the disaster was still sinking in. Nearly 8,000 ships lost, including some of the finest vessels in the Galactic Alliance fleet. Marshal reported Intelligence Director Velkane. Long-range sensors are detecting no immediate threats to our system. It will take the humans months to organize a fleet capable of threatening our defenses, assuming they even dare to attempt such an assault. Zekthara's 4 arms gestured in the Kethmoran equivalent of a nod. Begin mobilizing our reserve fleets. If the humans want a war, they'll find that Earth was only the beginning of their troubles. We'll crush their colonies one by one until they beg for mercy. What neither of them realized was that human ships were already in their system. They had been there for 3 days, hidden in the shadow of Vexthoris' outermost gas giant, running completely silent while their crews made final preparations for an assault that would redefine the concept of preemptive strike. Captain David Kim floated in the zero-gravity briefing room of the UES Nemesis, addressing the commanders of Battle Group Retribution. 50 ships, handpicked from humanity's most experienced crews, armed with weapons that existed in violation of every galactic treaty ever signed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what we're about to do has never been attempted in the history of galactic warfare. We're going to destroy the command structure of the Kethmoran Empire in under 6 hours, using methods they won't see coming because they've never imagined anyone would be crazy enough to try them." The plan was insane by any rational standard. Instead of engaging the orbital defenses directly, the human fleet would use a combination of quantum tunneling devices and temporal displacement technology to bypass the Kethmoran shields entirely. They would materialize inside the defensive perimeter and strike at the planet itself while the orbital platforms were still trying to figure out where the attack was coming from. But the real innovation was psychological. The humans weren't just planning to defeat the Kethmoran military. They were planning to do it in a way that would terrify every other species in the galaxy. The message would be clear. If you threaten our families, nowhere in the universe is safe from our retaliation. The attack began at 0347 local time, as Vexthor's primary sun was rising over the capital continent. The first sign that something was wrong came when the planet's quantum detection grid registered massive spatial distortions directly above the major population centers. Before the technicians could even process what they were seeing, human ships began materializing out of nowhere. But these weren't the heavily armed dreadnoughts that the Kethmorans expected. Instead, they were sleek, smaller vessels that moved with impossible grace through the planet's upper atmosphere. Each ship carried a payload that represented decades of human scientific development, nanoscale devices that could disassemble matter at the atomic level. The first target was the Planetary Communications Array, a massive complex that coordinated not just military operations, but civilian infrastructure across the entire system. The human strike team didn't destroy the facility with conventional weapons. Instead, they released a cloud of self-replicating machines that consumed the entire complex in less than 10 minutes, converting the metal and electronics into raw materials that reassembled themselves into a giant message visible from orbit. Earth remembers. Marshal Zekthara watched in horror as his command displays began going dark one by one. The humans weren't just attacking military targets. They were systematically dismantling the technological infrastructure that kept Kethmoran civilization functioning. Power grids, transportation networks, manufacturing centers, everything was being consumed by machines that turned advanced technology into useless slag. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Our sensors show only 50 ships. They shouldn't be able to penetrate our defenses." "Sir," his sensor operator's voice was shaking. "They didn't penetrate our defenses. They bypassed them completely. Those ships appeared inside our protective grid using some kind of spatial folding technology we've never encountered before." The truth was even worse than the Kethmorans imagined. The humans weren't just using advanced technology. They were using principles of physics that other species had dismissed as theoretically impossible. While the galaxy's scientists had spent millennia refining existing knowledge, human researchers had been asking different questions entirely. What if space and time weren't fixed constants, but variables that could be manipulated? What if the quantum foam that existed between dimensions could be used as a highway for faster-than-light travel that bypassed normal space entirely? What if matter itself was just energy in a stable configuration that could be reconfigured at will? The humans had found answers to questions that other species had never thought to ask. The result was technology that seemed like magic to civilizations that had been following conventional scientific paradigms for millions of years. Commander Sarah Chun, Admiral Chen's daughter and a graduate of Earth's most elite military academy, piloted her fighter through the chaos above Vexthor's capital city. Her mission was specific: locate and capture the Kethmoran High Council members who had voted to authorize the attack on Earth. Unlike her mother's generation, Sarah and her peers had grown up knowing that humanity was surrounded by potential enemies. They had trained for this their entire lives, and they fought with the cold precision of surgeons combined with the passionate fury of people defending their home. Her ship's AI located the underground bunker where the Kethmoran leadership was hiding, but the facility was protected by energy shields that could withstand direct hits from antimatter warheads. A conventional assault would take hours and cause massive civilian casualties. Sarah chose a different approach. Her fighter deployed a device that looked like nothing more than a metallic sphere the size of a basketball. But when it touched the bunker's shield, something extraordinary happened. The sphere began converting the energy field into matter, creating a cascade reaction that turned the protective barrier into a solid crystalline structure that shattered under its own weight. The same technology that protected the bunker became the weapon that destroyed it. The Kethmoran shields, designed to repel energy weapons, had no defense against a device that transformed energy into unstable matter. Within minutes, Sarah's Marines were rappelling into the bunker complex, their objectives clear. The Kethmoran High Council members who had authorized genocide against humanity would be taken alive to stand trial for their crimes. The rest would be offered the same choice that humanity had been given: surrender or face annihilation. High Counselor Drek Thane, the primary architect of the plan to eliminate humanity, found himself face-to-face with a human soldier who couldn't have been older than his youngest offspring. But There was something in the young woman's eyes that made him understand exactly how seriously humanity took threats to their species. "Counselor Drekthane," she said, her voice amplified by her suit's speakers, "by the authority of the United Earth Space Command, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit genocide. You will be transported to Earth to stand trial for your crimes against humanity." "You cannot do this," he protested. "I am a sovereign leader of a galactic power. There are treaties, protocols." The young Marine's helmet retracted, revealing a face that could have belonged to any human teenager, except for the absolute certainty in her expression. "Counselor, when you decided to murder 4 billion humans, you voided every treaty and protocol in existence. Earth's courts will determine your fate, just as you tried to determine ours." Across the Kethmoran system, similar scenes were playing out. Human forces were systematically dismantling not just the military infrastructure, but the very concept that some species were more important than others. The orbital platforms that had protected Vexthoris for centuries were being converted into raw materials for construction projects that would benefit all the system's inhabitants, not just the ruling class. But perhaps most shocking of all was what the humans didn't do. They didn't target civilian populations. They didn't destroy cultural monuments or historical sites. They didn't engage in the wholesale slaughter that the Galactic Council had planned for Earth. Instead, they demonstrated a surgical precision that removed only those elements of Kethmoran society that had supported the genocide attempt. The message being sent to the galaxy was clear: humanity could strike anywhere, at any time, with weapons and tactics that made conventional defenses meaningless. But they chose to use that power responsibly, targeting only those who had chosen to become their enemies. As news of the Vexthoris assault spread across the galaxy, other member species of the Galactic Alliance began to reconsider their positions. The humans had just demonstrated that they possessed technology so advanced that the entire galactic community might as well have been fighting with stone tools. But they had also shown that they used that technology with restraint and precision. The Ethereal Collective was the first to withdraw from the Alliance, followed quickly by the Veltari Federation and the Crystalline Assembly. Within days, the coalition that had been assembled to destroy humanity was fracturing as species after species decided that they had more to gain from friendship with humans than from continued hostility. But there were still those who refused to accept the new reality. The Brutal clans, the Zephyrian hives, and the core Kethmoran military remained committed to humanity's destruction, even as their technological disadvantage became increasingly apparent. General Karthok of the Brutal clans sent a message to every remaining military commander in the Alliance. The humans may have superior technology, but they are still few in number. If we can force them into a prolonged conflict across multiple fronts, we can bleed them dry. They cannot be everywhere at once. It was logical thinking, based on traditional military doctrine. Unfortunately for General Karthok, the humans were about to demonstrate that traditional thinking no longer applied to warfare in the 26th century. Captain Kim smiled as he read the intercepted communications from the enemy commanders. They were still thinking in terms of ship-to-ship combat and territorial control. They hadn't yet realized that humanity had moved beyond such limitations. The next phase of the conflict would show the galaxy something that would change the nature of warfare forever. Humans didn't just fight with advanced technology. They fought with time itself as their ally. And they were about to prove that the past, present, and future were all weapons in the right hands. The Brutal clan homeworld of Graktos was a nightmare of perpetual warfare. For 10,000 years, the planet's surface had been scarred by endless conflicts between competing clan factions, each battle serving as training for the species' role as the galaxy's premier military force. Massive fortress cities dotted the landscape like metal cancers, their walls bristling with weapons designed to repel any conceivable assault. General Karthok stood atop the highest tower of Fortress Bloodfang, surveying his domain with satisfaction. Unlike the soft Kethmorans, his people had been preparing for total war since before they achieved spaceflight. Every Brutal from the moment of birth was trained in combat, strategy, and the art of killing. If the humans wanted a fight, they would get one that would make their victory at Earth seem like a minor skirmish. "General," reported War Chief Grakmar, "our fleet strength now stands at 15,000 vessels, with reinforcements arriving daily. The humans may have surprised our allies, but they will find the Brutal clans a different proposition entirely. Karthok's massive jaws split in a predatory grin. Excellent. Let the humans come with their tricks and their advanced weapons. When they face warriors who have known nothing but war for their entire existence, they will learn that technology means nothing without the will to use it properly. What neither of them knew was that human observers had been studying Brutal military doctrine for over a century. Every battle, every tactical innovation, every strategic principle had been cataloged, analyzed, and countered. The humans weren't planning to fight the Brutal clans on their terms. They were planning to fight them on no terms at all. Dr. Elizabeth Hawking stood in the temporal research facility hidden beneath Luna's surface, making final adjustments to humanity's most classified weapon. The Kronos Array was the culmination of 50 years of research into the manipulation of time itself, based on theories that Einstein had only dreamed of and mathematics that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. Dr. Hawking called her assistant, a young physicist named Dr. Chun, no relation to the Admiral. The targeting calculations are complete. We can create a localized temporal distortion field around any target within 1,000 light-year radius. Elizabeth nodded grimly. What they were about to do violated every principle of ethical warfare ever established. But then, again, the Brutal clans had shown no interest in ethics when they voted to exterminate humanity. Sometimes, when facing an enemy committed to genocide, the only moral choice was to ensure they could never threaten anyone again. The attack on Gractos began not with ships or weapons, but with time itself. Human scientists activated the Kronos Array and created a temporal bubble around the Brutal homeworld, effectively isolating it from the rest of the universe. To outside observers, the planet simply vanished from normal space-time, as if it had never existed. But inside the bubble, something far more sophisticated was happening. The humans had created a pocket universe where they could control the flow of time relative to the outside galaxy. Every second that passed in normal space translated to hours within the bubble, giving human forces an almost infinite amount of time to plan and execute their assault, while the rest of the galaxy remained frozen in a single moment. General Karthok felt the change immediately, though he didn't understand what was happening. The light from his system's star began to shift, taking on a strange quality that made his fortress's instruments give impossible readings. Communication with the orbital defense platforms became sporadic, then ceased entirely. "War Chief," he growled, "what is happening to our sensors?" Before Grakmar could answer, human ships began appearing in Gractos' atmosphere. But these weren't the same vessels that had struck at other worlds. These ships moved like living creatures, their hulls shifting and adapting in real time as they encountered different atmospheric conditions. They seemed to flow through the air rather than flying, avoiding weapons fire not by speed or maneuverability, but by simply not being where the weapons were aimed. The truth was even more disturbing than it appeared. The humans had developed ships that existed in a state of quantum superposition, occupying multiple probable locations simultaneously until the moment they chose to interact with the physical world. Targeting them was like trying to shoot at ghosts that might or might not be real. Commander Jake Morrison piloted his ship, the UES Paradox, through the hellstorm of anti-aircraft fire rising from Fortress Bloodfawn. His vessel existed in 17 different quantum states simultaneously, appearing solid only when he chose to fire his weapons or deploy his troops. To the Brutal defenders below, it looked like he was teleporting randomly through their defensive grid. Jake's mission was personal. His sister had been serving on a diplomatic vessel when the Galactic Alliance attack began. Her ship had been among the first destroyed, vaporized by Brutal weapons before she even knew there was a war. The Brutal clans had taught the galaxy that warfare was about dominance and survival of the strongest. Now humanity was going to teach them that there were things worse than death. The assault force that materialized within Fortress Bloodfawn wasn't composed of human soldiers in the traditional sense. Instead, it consisted of entities that had once been human but had chosen to transcend biological limitations in order to fight more effectively. They called themselves the Ascended, and they had volunteered to undergo procedures that turned them into living weapons. War Chief Grakmar found himself facing something that challenged every assumption he had about warfare. The creature standing before him had once been human, but now it existed as a hybrid of biological consciousness and quantum machinery. It could phase through matter at will, manipulate energy fields with its thoughts, and process tactical information at speeds that made supercomputers seem sluggish. "I am War Chief Grakmar of the Bloodfang clan," he announced, raising his massive warhammer. "I have killed 1,000 enemies in single combat. I do not fear death." The ascended entity regarded him with eyes that held depths of knowledge no biological mind could contain. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "War Chief, we do not offer you death. We offer you education. Your species believes that strength comes from the ability to destroy. You are about to learn that true strength comes from the ability to create, to build, to protect what you value. Your war is already over. The question now is whether you will learn from your defeat or repeat it endlessly." What happened next was unprecedented in galactic military history. Instead of killing or capturing the brutal forces, the humans began demonstrating technologies that made warfare itself obsolete. They showed energy fields that could neutralize any weapon before it was fired. They revealed manufacturing capabilities that could rebuild destroyed infrastructure in hours. Most shocking of all, they displayed medical technology that could heal injuries that the Brutal had considered permanently disabling. General Karthok watched from his command center as his finest warriors laid down their weapons, not in defeat, but in wonder. The humans were offering them something they had never imagined possible. A future where strength didn't have to come from the ability to inflict suffering on others. "This is impossible," he muttered, watching as human engineers worked alongside Brutal technicians to rebuild defensive systems that had been damaged in the assault. "We are enemies. Why are they helping us?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Sarah Chun materialized in his command center, her image projected through technology that allowed her to appear anywhere in the galaxy instantaneously. She looked older than when she had faced the alien fleet at Jupiter, but her eyes held the same unwavering determination. "General Karthok, humanity learned long ago that the strongest civilizations are those that lift others up rather than tearing them down. We could destroy your species in a matter of hours, but what would that accomplish? Instead, we're offering you the chance to become something greater than you've ever imagined." Karthok's massive frame shook with something that might have been laughter or might have been despair. "You speak of civilization and cooperation, but you have just demonstrated weapons that could unmake reality itself. How do we know this is not simply another form of conquest?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Because, General, we're going to give you the same technology we've used to defeat you. Every innovation, every scientific breakthrough, every advancement that allowed us to win this war, we're going to share it all. The only condition is that you use it to build rather than to destroy." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just winning the war, they were redefining what victory meant. Instead of subjugating their enemies, they were transforming them into allies by offering them power beyond their wildest dreams, coupled with the wisdom to use it responsibly. Across the galaxy, the same scene was playing out on dozens of worlds. Human forces would arrive with overwhelming technological superiority, demonstrate their ability to destroy any resistance effortlessly, and then offer their former enemies partnership instead of domination. The Zephyrian hives were shown how to enhance their biological engineering capabilities to create living ships that could repair themselves and adapt to any environment. The crystalline assembly learned how to manipulate matter at the quantum level, allowing them to build structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the greatest gift humanity offered was something that couldn't be quantified by any scientific measurement: hope. For the first time in galactic history, species that had been locked in cycles of competition and conflict were shown a path forward that didn't require the destruction of their neighbors. Dr. Velkane of the Kethmoran Intelligence Service found himself working alongside human scientists to develop new forms of faster-than-light communication that would allow real-time coordination between species across the galaxy. The woman he was working with, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, had lost her entire family when his government ordered the attack on Earth's colonies. "Why?" he asked her during one of their research sessions. Your people died because of decisions my government made. Why are you helping us instead of seeking revenge? Jennifer looked up from the quantum resonance calculations they had been working on. Because, Dr. Velkane, revenge would just perpetuate the cycle that brought us to war in the first place. My family died fighting to protect others. The best way I can honor their memory is by building something that ensures no one else has to make that sacrifice. It was a perspective that fundamentally challenged everything the galactic community thought it knew about conflict resolution. The humans weren't just militarily superior. They were morally evolved in ways that made traditional concepts of conquest and dominance seem primitive. As the temporal bubble around Gracteos finally dissolved and the planet rejoined normal space-time, the galaxy discovered that the war was effectively over. Not because one side had been destroyed, but because the very nature of the conflict had been transformed into something unprecedented, a collaborative effort to build a better future for all sentient life. The Galactic Council that had voted to eliminate humanity found themselves invited to Earth not as prisoners or subordinates, but as partners in the greatest undertaking in galactic history, the creation of a truly unified civilization that could explore the universe beyond their galaxy and spread life among the stars. But even as peace began to settle across known space, long-range sensors were detecting something that would test everything humanity and their new allies had built together. Something was coming from the void between galaxies, and it was far more dangerous than any conflict they had faced so far. 5 years after the end of what historians would call the Unity War, the Milky Way galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The massive space station orbiting Earth's moon served as the headquarters of the Galactic Cooperative, where representatives from over 300 species worked together on projects that would have been impossible for any single civilization to accomplish alone. Admiral Sarah Chun, now promoted to Director of Galactic Defense, stood before the massive observation deck watching construction crews from a dozen different species work on humanity's most ambitious project yet, a ring of defensive platforms that encircled the entire galaxy. Each platform was the size of a small moon, equipped with technology that combined the best innovations from every member species. Director, reported her aide, a young Veltari named Silthara whose bioluminescent patches glowed with excitement. Long-range sensors have confirmed the anomaly. There's definitely something approaching from the Andromeda sector, and it's moving faster than anything we've encountered before. Sarah nodded grimly. They had known this day would come eventually. The universe was vast, and it was naive to think that their corner of it was the only place where intelligent life had evolved. The real question was whether what was coming would be friend or foe. What's the analysis from the xenobiology teams? That's the problem, Director. Whatever is approaching doesn't match any life pattern we have on record. The energy signatures suggest technology based on principles we don't understand, and the ships themselves appear to be made of some kind of living metal that exists in a state of constant transformation. The beings that emerged from the void between galaxies called themselves the Harbingers, though that name was more of a conceptual translation than anything resembling their actual designation. They were older than any civilization in the Milky Way, having achieved technological transcendence when most species were still learning to use fire. Their ships weren't built so much as grown, cultivated from exotic matter that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each vessel was unique, shaped by eons of experience and adaptation to challenges that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. They had been traveling through the cosmic void for millions of years, moving from galaxy to galaxy in search of something that no one in the Milky Way could have anticipated. The first contact was unlike anything in galactic history. The Harbingers didn't send ambassadors or establish communication protocols. Instead, they transmitted a single message directly into the consciousness of every sentient being in the galaxy simultaneously. Young civilizations of this galaxy, the voice spoke without words, reaching into minds through means that transcended normal physics. We have observed your recent unification with interest. You have achieved something rare in the universe, the transformation of conflict into cooperation. This is why we have come to you with an offer that we extend to only the most exceptional civilizations. Director Chen felt the presence in her mind like a whisper from eternity itself. Around her, Representatives from every species stood in stunned silence as the message continued. We are the harbingers of the great work, and we offer you the chance to join us in the ultimate endeavor, the preparation of this universe for what comes after. In approximately 10 million years, this cosmos will face a crisis that will determine whether consciousness survives the transition to the next phase of reality. We offer you the knowledge and tools to help ensure that survival, but the choice must be unanimous among all your species. The implications were staggering. The Harbingers were offering the galaxy membership in a cosmic civilization that spanned multiple universes and operated on timescales that made galactic history seem like a brief moment. But they were also revealing that existence itself was far more fragile and temporary than anyone had realized. The debate that followed lasted for months. Species that had recently been enemies found themselves unified in trying to understand what the Harbingers were actually offering. The technology they demonstrated was so advanced that it seemed indistinguishable from magic, but the knowledge they shared suggested responsibilities that would fundamentally change the nature of life in the galaxy. General Karthok, now serving as the Brutal representative to the Cooperative Council, was among the most vocal skeptics. How do we know this isn't simply another form of conquest? They speak of preparation for cosmic crisis, but perhaps they are the crisis. It was Dr. Elizabeth Hawking, now Director of Humanities Temporal Research Division, who provided the answer. Using technology developed through cooperation with former enemies, she managed to peer forward through time to catch glimpses of what the Harbingers claimed was coming. What she saw in the far future terrified and amazed her in equal measure. The universe itself was approaching a fundamental transition, a moment when the basic laws of physics would shift into new configurations. Without preparation, without civilizations advanced enough to maintain the stability fields necessary to preserve matter and energy in their current forms, everything that had ever existed would simply cease to be. The Harbingers aren't invaders, she reported to the assembled council. They're gardeners, cultivating civilizations capable of surviving the ultimate test. And, according to my calculations, our galaxy is one of only 12 in the observable universe that has achieved the level of cooperation necessary to attempt the great work. The decision to accept the Harbingers' offer was ultimately made not by governments or military leaders, but by the children. Across the galaxy, young beings from every species reached the same conclusion. If there was even a possibility of preserving life and consciousness through the cosmic transition, they had a moral obligation to try. Commander Sarah Chun, Admiral Chin's granddaughter and a graduate of the first truly integrated galactic academy, stood aboard the first hybrid vessel designed using Harbinger technology. The ship existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, its crew consisting of representatives from every species in the galaxy working together with Harbinger entities that had volunteered to serve as mentors. "This is remarkable," breathed Dr. Velkane, now elderly but still contributing to the research effort. "We're not just exploring space anymore. We're exploring reality itself." The ship's destination was the galactic core, where the Harbingers had shown them how to build a device that would serve as a reality anchor during the cosmic transition. It was a project that would take millions of years to complete, requiring the cooperation of billions of beings across hundreds of generations. But humanity and their allies had learned something important during their brief war, that the greatest achievements came not from competition, but from collaboration, not from the desire to dominate, but from the commitment to protect and preserve what was valuable. As the ship approached the galactic core, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Her grandmother's generation had faced extinction and responded by becoming stronger. Her mother's generation had faced conflict and responded by building peace. Now her generation faced the ultimate challenge, ensuring that consciousness itself survived the death and rebirth of the universe. The Harbingers had chosen well when they selected the Milky Way galaxy for inclusion in the great work. Humanity had demonstrated that they could turn enemies into allies, transform destruction into creation, and find hope in the darkest circumstances. Combined with the unique strengths of every other species in the galaxy, they represented something unprecedented, a civilization capable of thinking and working on cosmic timescales while never losing sight of the individual lives that made that civilization meaningful. The device at the galactic core began to take shape, built from matter that existed in states unknown to previous physics and powered by the combined will of trillions of conscious beings. It would serve as one node in a network spanning multiple galaxies, all working together to maintain stability during the universe's transition to its next phase. But, perhaps more importantly, it represented something that the cosmos had never seen before, a civilization that had learned to see beyond its own immediate survival to take responsibility for the continuation of existence itself. The war that had been intended to end humanity's expansion had instead catalyzed the creation of something magnificent, a galactic civilization united by shared purpose, equipped with technology that transcended the boundaries of known science, and committed to ensuring that consciousness, creativity, and hope would survive even the end of the universe itself. As Sarah watched stars being born in the galactic core's stellar nurseries, she understood that the real victory hadn't been the battles they had won or the enemies they had defeated. The real victory was that they had learned to see beyond conflict to the ultimate goal, the preservation and expansion of life in all its forms. The universe was vast and full of wonders beyond imagination, but it was also fragile and temporary. Thanks to humanity's refusal to accept extinction and their ability to inspire cooperation among former enemies, consciousness would have a chance to survive the greatest test it would ever face. The galaxy had learned that when humans said they would defend their home, they didn't just mean Earth. They meant reality itself, and they would spend the next 10 million years proving that some things were worth any sacrifice to preserve. In the end, the greatest human victory wasn't defeating their enemies. It was turning them into family, and, together, preparing to write the next chapter of existence itself.